Have it scrutinized overly. I've scrutinized the volume, but that's about it.
Sounds good to me.
All right, welcome to live chat. We're gonna go live on talking about altered carbon, and if you have anything you want to say in the chat, say it, and we'll talk about it at the end. Whew. All right, I am ready when you are, my friend.
Today on Binges Assemble, we are watching Altered Carbon Season 2, Episode 3, Nightmare Alley. Long live Gilchrist Falconer.
Yeah, all that right after this. Abby, have no control over. Welcome to Bingers Assemble. My name's Matthew Carroll.
I'm Matthew S. Fox.
What's up, buddy?
I'm good. Edit that out. I'm good. I'm good. It's last week was a little spotty. I know we were not recording as much because I was moving. I now have at least my desk, my computer all set up. We have the kitchen set up so we can get to do some cooking. Yeah, good to be all settled in. I'm getting excited to get back to our regular schedule. So this was a good way to kick things off.
Me too. And this episode was a great way to kick it off. This episode finally kind of won me over for the season in multiple ways, but there's one particular moment which we'll talk about, I'm sure, plenty. Let's give a quick rundown of what happened in this episode. This is the episode where Kovac has been captured at the end of the last episode, and so this is where they torture him and they extract his memories and put him in what is called the Circle, where he is to fight to the death his loved ones, basically. And they go in kind of ascending order and make him fight all of his loved ones, and he's also been drugged, and so that's the thrust of this episode, is him fighting basically all of the main characters from last season, which is supposed to culminate with Gilchrist Falconer, but it turns out the real Gilchrist Falconer shows up and fights alongside him, and then inspires inspires rebellion among the ranks.
Yeah.
And that was a great moment.
I have to say, I cannot remember the last time that a single line of dialogue made me do a complete 180 about a piece of media.
Right.
The first half of this episode, maybe even the first 2/3, I was not really there. I was still in that place of like, okay, the story seems like it's pretty much the same as we got last time. And a lot of the stuff about torturing him and extraction and having to face mortal combat, it all just seemed like kind of a rerun of last season.
Yep.
And
even knowing that Gilchrist is running after him with a sword, it felt like it was going to be exactly like what happened with Raylyn last season when she shows up and they're being thrown into the ring with those monsters. But this was way more personal, way more interesting, and then the "Long Live Gilchrist Falconer" line was just floored me.
That was my point. Is that one line is what changed everything for me, because in that moment they pulled back the curtain some. They showed, wait a minute, this world is actually a lot different than the last one you thought, because all over this world there's people who believe. There's people who really think the same way that our heroes do, and I was just like, okay, I am so in now. So yeah, I was reluctant, but that one line and everything that came after, I'm back on board with where the show's going to go.
Yeah, I am too, and I am. I think the thing that was most interesting about that line, and the thing that has completely flipped the script for this entire series. Even we've had 12 episodes now, and this is the 13th, and this is the first moment of hope for a society.
Yeah.
No, there's really never been a glimmer of hope for anyone. It's all been about Kovac kind of learning to live in this dark mirror world that he failed to stop, and then this moment where this girl rebels against the Protectorate is just like, oh my gosh, they could rally an army of people that are like-minded on their side and actually fight against, the first time we've ever seen a lower class person rebel against the Meths. I loved it. Oh, it was great.
It was great, and it because I like that that deep continuity you're always talking about. There's a part of me that's still hoping. All of this is 30 years after, everything that happened on Earth that Kovacs was doing. And there's a part of me that's hoping that like the story of that got out, and the story that is part of what helped inspire people on this planet to want to kind of like bring back the rebellion that had happened in her father's day and all that.
Possibly, yeah.
But even without that, I'm really enjoying seeing like this mass movement, and especially like the moment at the very end where you realize Falconer doesn't know who she is fully. That also got really interesting to me, because what I like is here we have like long live Kelchris Falconer. You have basically a movement started by a person. That person's now been dead for hundreds of years, at least everyone thought so, but the ideas have continued. And like the idea that like everyone's rallying around this memory of a person, and that person doesn't even know who they are anymore. Oh, there's so much there to explore.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting is in this moment she doesn't even know her name, so she hasn't been confronted with the fact that this movement is a movement for her. Like, I wonder what she's even doing then. Like, what is her motivation for killing all these people? We have no idea, and I'm sure this next episode will finally get that exposition dump we've been waiting on. Really, really been waiting on.
We always talked about how we never got Rey's backstory. I would love it if the next episode was like what's been happening to Falconer for the last 280 years.
Yeah. I agree. Well, we don't know how long. Yeah, something like that anyway. We don't know how long Kovacs lived after her the first time.
Right.
So he could have lived another
a little bit longer.
15, 20 years. But yeah, like something like that. It's been almost 300 years since she's been, that we know of, that she's been in a body. So yeah, I don't know. Did you appreciate, I kind of was hoping for you this was better. Did you appreciate the fact that a lot of the ultra violence that happened in this episode happened to the blue-blooded synths?
I don't think that made much of a difference to me, but I didn't find the violence to be horrible. I thought the violence was brutal, but I didn't think it was like pornographic though. And I say, like, I got no problem with porn. Violence porn is something I'm not a big fan of. Like, it wasn't shot to be like, look how wonderful and awesome and cool the Horus blood and gore is. It was just a brutal fight. I did like, though, the idea of the blue blood as the marker of it not being an organic.
I like that too. I really think that they were attempting here, and I may be wrong, but it felt to me like, because we've seen synths before, I don't think we've ever seen that they had blue blood, and it felt to me like they were trying a little bit to curb some of the violence from this episode a little bit by having it feel a little cartoony when they broke an arm and it was blue that sprayed everywhere. But I may be wrong.
You might be. I mean, certainly it felt like the violence was toned down. Like, I definitely think that was true. I think,
I don't know that it was, except for the blueness, because like when he snapped, they did multiple things in this in these moments, like when he snaps Vernon's arm in half. Like, if that had been red blood and actual red bone, I think that, or like, white bone, like, I think that would have been really gruesome. But because it was like a blue bone and blood popping out, I think it felt cartoony in a way that was, not unsatisfying from a violence perspective, but like.
See, for me, I had to turn away. That was still a moment I had to turn away.
Oh, was it?
Like,
okay.
Yeah.
See, to me, it bothered me even less.
It felt more earned than some of the other stuff, so I wasn't like upset about it, but yeah, I could not watch during that moment.
Okay, cool.
Blue blood or red.
I was curious. I was just curious if that was effective for you, because I think that might have been something they were going for, but I'm not, not 100%.
It's entirely true, and I think I've admitted, like, I'm pretty far off on the spectrum. I think there may be a lot of other people who were less bothered by it because it was blue. To me, I think the blue was mostly a way to set up this idea that the red blood was a clear sign that
Kelchris is biological.
Kelchris was biological. And
yeah,
it also made sense
too.
to me in the, like, I could imagine that, like, it would make a lot of sense to me in the story that for this particular thing, people set it up to make the synths always have blue blood, because they want to do the contrast of, like, if the synths die, it's not a big deal, they're fine, but you want to see the prisoner suffer. You want to see the prisoner die. And so, like, in story, I could see that kind of like being what you're talking about, is that they want for the audience there to be like a real difference between, okay, a synth dying, it's not a big deal, but the prisoner dying, that's awesome, that's satisfying. Be bloodthirsty because that has real blood. That's actually red. Does
Right.
that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Totally. You know what the weirdest moment in the fight for me was? When he looked at Vernon and said, "Look who's going off book now." Because that's a reference to when Vernon went off book at the party. So he like,
Oh, that's right.
yeah. So he's like, he weirdly is using a grudge with Vernon that he actually had in real life, knowing it's not actually Vernon. He like used that weird grudge moment to like motivate him, or just as a funny joke, but like it's a joke only for him. It was really a strange line. I was like, what?
I didn't even remember that from first season, but that's a great cut. It's funny. I actually typed in the chat to you that whole fight scene seemed like the darkest timeline version of This Is Your Life.
Yes. Yes.
It's like, and I appreciate it because I can see how it would be this incredible psychological torture of having all these people who you loved or who maybe you let down, like, come to fight you. And I mean, in terms of pure spectacle of bloodthirsty gladiatorial show, like, I mean, I hate it. It's awful, but that's incredibly effective. At first, when they talked about the circle, and I thought it was just like basically gladiatorial combat, I was thinking, really, this is that bad? But once I realized what they were doing, I was like, oof, okay, this is using the technology in some really effed up ways, and I appreciate this.
Yeah. I keep watching. I completely agree. I think that this was a really clever and different use of the sleeves and the synths and everything. Like, it's just a super fun way of using it. And they even downloaded, which I've talked a lot about how Kelchrist was one way in his head and how she might be different, and Raylin was one way in his head, and when he finally found her, she was very different. These versions that he is fighting are actually imprints that he created from his own mind. They created from his own mind. So they are holding things against him. Like, Vernon comes in and saying, "You just take and take and take. You never cared about Lizzie." Da, da, da. Like, these are things that not only does these aren't things that Vernon feels about Kovac. These are things that Kovac thinks he deserves, which is even more psychologically damaging and more effective, because all these people, it's so cool. I mean, I've talked before. I'm someone who deals with anxiety and things like that, and one of the things that I've worked really to control it, but I used to always be worrying, like, oh, what, like, I would always write these scripts in my head of, oh, this person is upset at me for this, and they must have all this resentment against me for that, and that kind of thing. And I think I think everyone does that to some extent, depending on where your anxiety is. It may be that you're mostly 99% of the time you completely ignore it, or these voices are very loud for you. But so to see that played out like that, and it be, you're right, not just like what would Vernon actually think, but what was, that Takashi did worry that maybe he was taking too much from Vernon and he was pushing him too far, and then he did worry that maybe that he was unfair to his sister and all this kind of stuff. Like, it makes me wonder what they're actually pulling out of his head, because when I'm watching it, I was thinking it was people that he loved or people that he cared for. But as I continue to watch it, I was like, oh wait, or maybe it's people he thinks of as victims of his life.
Yeah, people he let down.
Yeah.
Like, I get why they only wanted to do a couple of them. And I think they probably chose the right one. But how much would you love to see Poe be one of them?
I thought about that, and then that's what's making me wonder if it's a victim thing. Although he is a victim in a way of him because of the damage that's been done, but maybe he thinks people that have like died or that he caused their death or something. I don't know. That's why I'm trying to like piece together why these people. Of course, we don't know that he caused any of the other people's deaths.
Right. I'm guessing that in part, like, clearly he figured it out, and it seems like it wouldn't be too hard to figure out. But I think the idea is supposed to be that you, as the person, are not aware that these are synths, that they're fake. And so given that Poe was never a real corporeal body, I can imagine that the people running it didn't want to put in Poe because it would be too easy to know, like, Poe's not real.
Yeah.
But it still would have been interesting because I think, Poe has fought back pretty hard about like, look, the way you're treating me and the way you're bossing me around and stuff. Um,
Absolutely.
with that, so what did you think about Poe's storyline here? And him like going back to find the AIs and then him getting an AI to come help him.
I really enjoyed it. He went and found the AI Hospitality Union, which is the thing that we met first season, basically. And he meets Dig 301, who seems like definitely a possible love interest for him, which I just love that. I love that they're really letting him have a story. I normally am not that on board with just throwing in a love interest for no reason, but in this situation, it like kind of gives him a chance to flesh out his character. It gives him an AI to care about. Last season, they gave him a reason to kill an AI, and that was like a hard decision for him to make. And now he has an AI that he wants to care about and protect, possibly. And so I can imagine storylines going forward where Kovacs wants to do something that not only puts him in danger, but puts his AI friend in danger. And then what do you do in that situation? And he has to decide between, his friend and Kovacs, and protecting an AI, and if that's worth protecting. And Kovacs probably wouldn't think so, because in many ways Kovacs still doesn't view Poe as real or worth saving. So it brings up a lot of interesting ideas. Excuse me. Phew. What was I gonna say? Oh, I thought there was some threads here that I found interesting about him having faith in Kovacs. And even before he said he had faith in Kovacs, he says that explicitly. But even before that, his service to Kovacs is reminding me a little bit of Mr. Lung's service to
interesting
to Raylan, which so you've got these normal people who worship myths, but then these AIs are worshiping and they say it in the first episode. They say he's like a obsessed girlfriend, and like what if we were going somewhere where he is kind of like the other. It's almost like the AIs. I mean, literally, this is like a god myth. The humans are their creators. And the AIs have said, we're no longer serving them. A lot of them are no longer serving their creators. But then you've got this one character of Poe who still thinks he's this one human is worth serving and has worked with him and served him for a long time. And it made me wonder if they're going to do something with that. Yeah,
so a couple of things on that. First, just backing up a second, I was at first kind of frustrated with the Poe going to talk to other AIs, all of whom felt like they didn't want to help humans, because that just felt very much like a retrace of what we'd gotten in season 1. But I did like that, what we never got in that season was he never convinced anyone. And so once he starts working with someone, I did really like it. And I was really interested to see, like Poe getting an AI love interest is kind of awesome.
Yeah.
But also just, I thought that was really interesting. And I also really like just a little bit of the glimpse into the idea that all of them were helping to do excavation on elder technology. Because that tells me that, we're going to start to pull on those strings a little bit more this season. So I'm really excited for that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, like we started to see them just kind of like play. And that the idea that some of them were still playing with that technology, like they're not finished with those thoughts. Like, I think we're going to play with that some more.
Good call. Because we know that I think you may have just solved the season. Because if these AIs are working on elder technology, and we know that there are fully armed satellites in the skies above the planet, I have a feeling we're going to have a final showdown where that is used as a plot point, where the AIs use whatever they've learned in these excavations to actually control these satellites and have great power over the Protectorate.
Yeah.
That sounds like definite possibilities.
Yeah. So I'm really excited to see where that goes. Actually, the faith question, I think you're touching into something really good. Especially because like there's a trope in literature a lot of the kind of like the servant who has the kind of like, slavish, almost godlike, put their master very much on a pedestal. And to me, one of the defining images of that often is the traditional like Victorian era English butler.
Yeah.
And as Poe says, he's very much not a bellman, but he very much is in that kind of like he reminds me almost of like a Downton Abbey kind of character.
For
And
sure.
Downton Abbey's a
For
little
sure.
bit post-Victorian. It's Edwardian, but still that idea of like,
The
my
fact that
life
the
is
AI
to serve, to help however I can. What he is, the perfection.
well, and if they're making a point about him being a servant to Kovac, then I don't think it's any mistake that the AIs mistake him for a bellman and keep calling him that, and he gets defensive, because I think that if we're going down a plot line where that's going to be an issue, where he has to decide whether he a servant of Kovac, like does he want to decide to be that, or does he want to be more? I think that's all super fascinating from his perspective. Real cool.
And that would be a great thing for him to I forget her number, but the AI he works with just has like a designation number.
It's Dig 301 is her name.
Dig 301, which again I think is supposed to be a very, like, Poe is programmed to be this like servant to a person. They're literally just like a construction machine that has an AI, to go, like, it's kind of an interesting play on all the stuff about the emergency holograms. That's such a big deal in Star Trek.
Yeah.
But I would love it if to some extent they taught each other a little bit, that he teaches her that you can somewhat have faith in individual people, but that maybe she teaches Poe to not put Kovac on such a pedestal. I could see that being a really interesting dynamic that really helps Poe grow, and Poe's relationship with Kovac grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Say Poe grow 3 times.
Poe grow, Poe grow, Poe grow.
Not that easy. It's not that easy.
Nope.
We had a little bit more from the what's her name? The bounty hunter this episode.
Oh yeah, Misty. I know she's got her own name, but I should call it. She's Misty Knight in my mind.
Misty Knight's fine. She has coils that enhance her brain, which I found kind of neat.
Yeah, I've been wondering we saw those on her head, and we didn't quite know what they were, but I liked that idea.
Yeah, I forget what they actually call them. Something coils, like brain coils, or something that prove. And what I liked is the first time we actually see them activate that I know of was during a sexual experience. So they're not like, I love that this show shows that all these enhancements you get, yes, they're for battle, sure, but like there's other interests that human beings have and other reasons we would want to enhance our like ability to process and enhance sensations and things. So I love that.
It's funny. It's funny to me. I never thought of this in season 1, but maybe season 2, the vibe is just stronger. Did you ever play the role-playing game Shadowpunk?
No, I'm sorry,
Shadowrun.
Oh no, I haven't.
So I got the name mixed up because Shadowrun is, to me, very much the definition of kind of like a cyberpunk world. But it's a really interesting role-playing world in which technology is incredibly advanced. Kind of fantasy world is also advanced. There's like goblins and trolls living amongst like high technology. But it's also this idea of all these people who are kind of like, partly cybernetic, and they have cybernetic enhancements and stuff like that. And she totally had that feel to me, which I really liked.
Yeah.
And it just kind of, it brought this whole, I think we're seeing a different kind of aesthetic to the world. Last time, I think mostly we spent time either with, the meths or with the very lower class people who mostly interacted with the meths, or even with like the cops. But like this season, I feel like we're getting much more of the world that doesn't really touch the meths much. And I'm really enjoying that. And I'm really that whole sort of like cyberpunk aspect to it is really, I'm really interested in seeing where they go with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we found out her motivation for this season, which I really like. She's got a missing brother, and she needs money to get him back. And one way to get that money by the end of this episode, because Misty Knight throughout this season has seemed very much like she's going to fall on the side of Kovac, which I think she eventually will. She seems like a good person with some, some level of honor, but like, and just interesting and charismatic. So maybe I'm being deceived, but she seems like she's gonna fall on the good side. Maybe, and she's at least been interesting, and we've seen things from her perspective a bit. But
Definitely.
then she has, at the end they give her a reason to go after Kovac. So that and a realistic good reason that is not just fight because we're both fighters. I don't know. This show's done a good job of giving everyone good reason for their actions, and I love that.
Like, I appreciate Poe going to her, and that was a nice scene, but it felt very in character for me, for her, that she says no to Poe.
Yeah.
God, his name is hard to say in these sentences. And so for later it to be like, because my feel at the end was, yeah, what Poe said is maybe still like getting to her a little bit, but it's much more this other motivation she has. I will also say I really appreciated that they introduced her love interest because, the sort of love triangle of last season of Kovac being with Ortega, but also still being in love with the memory of Falconer. That was a powerful story, and I liked how they played it out. I was worried at first when we got Misty Knight, whatever her name in this is, introduced, that she was also going to be a new love interest for Kovac, and we were going to have that same triangle dynamic again.
Right.
And here, it's not just that they show her having a partner who's a woman, because she could be bi, but she clearly is. That wasn't just a hookup. This is like her partner in a real way. I don't know if they're married or girlfriends, but they have a serious enough relationship that I feel like it takes off the table, unless they go really screwy, the idea of her and Kovac being romantically connected. And I really appreciate that, because I like that it's sort of like, no, we don't have to have that dynamic always when we introduce a new female character. And it also opens a lot more room for Kovac to really just explore his feelings for Falconer and who she is and what's happened to her and how that changes their dynamic.
Yeah, it would be weird at this point for the character of Kovac to be interested in anyone else when the girl he's been chasing after for 300 years, or at least 30, but really 300, is finally within his grasp for him to be like, oh, but also I want to go hit on this other girl. So he probably needs to be, like, just for story's sake, probably needs to be a little monogamous this season.
Yeah. I don't think there's going to be a Bancroft's wife hanging around this time.
Right. Not out of, I'm sure him and Kel can have whatever arrangement they want, but I just can't see him being distracted by anything while he's pursuing this particular situation.
Well, and it also, to me, it fits really well with his evolution in season 1, because in season 1, I felt like we saw him start as this character who had lost everything and literally just did not give a fuck. Like, he didn't care about anything. And so, like, yeah, this hot woman who's married to your client wants to seduce you. Why not? Like just take what's offered and be kind of hedonistic, in part because that's what everyone around him is doing.
Well, and also that line you just said, take what's offered, is an envoy. That's one of the things they say. That's one of their like chants, is take what's offered.
Oh, okay. It's funny. I didn't even think of it that way.
Yeah.
But because my point was more about him kind of being a little bit like, not seduced by, but a little bit, well, I mean, literally somewhat, yes, but like kind of buying into the world of the meths in some ways. And that by the end, he's a little bit horrified by that. And like part of his kind of rejection of all of that at the end of season 1 is also rejecting the idea of being so casual about those kind of things. So yeah, it makes sense that he'd now be much more like, yeah, like, the sex with Ortega was fun. The sex with Mrs. Bancroft was fun, but like Falconer's who I'm focused on, who I care about. And that's where I want to kind of direct my attention. And I could see him being, who knows, maybe there will be someone who, comes across his path and he connects with, and that I don't necessarily think that would be a bad thing necessarily, but like, to me, it makes sense for where his character has gone, that he's gone to much more of kind of an aesthetic place of like, yeah, I let myself revel in that, and I don't really feel good about that. Now I want to just focus on doing my work and finding the person I love.
Yeah. We got a couple things this episode that I feel like we have to point out. Well, for one thing, we got an answer to something that we've wondered about. Why don't people check the identity of the stack? Why isn't that a thing? Apparently it is this season. Apparently, Yeager checks the stack of him and says it's encrypted. So apparently that is a thing they can normally do, is check the identity of a stack. But Kovac's is encrypted, so that gives us some indication that they do have that technology in this world, which I liked.
Yeah. Do you know what DFQ stands for? They keep mentioning that.
Wait, you mean DHF?
DHF, yeah.
That's a human's. That's the data of the human, like that the data of their memory. Their DHF is what they needle cast around and what they download into the stack, and DHF is like the data that makes up a human being.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I picked it was something like that. I didn't know if we knew exactly what it stood for.
Yeah,
and certainly
they
you're
say
right.
it in the first
I
episode.
think we're now getting a much better idea of that technology. It does make me wonder, like, why hasn't everyone been using that technology to solve all these problems from the first season and earlier this season? But at least now we know it's a thing.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's see. Did you get the sense? I feel like there's definitely this tension between the governor and Yeager, and at times it times to me, until this episode even, actually, it felt like the governor was working to try to shut the protectorate down in some way, or like keep them out. She's definitely trying to get the colonel off of her planet so that she's in control, but it felt almost like she was actually doing it for the people. Yeah. Possibly. Now this episode, when she seems to be a little more callously betting on the match, that felt a little bit more like, oh, okay, maybe she is just an evil meth. But I got the sense that there's a number of times where he's like, well, what, we need to just shoot him, and she's like, no, we need to. It feels like there's a number of times where she's trying to avoid doing something that we as the audience would see as evil.
Yeah, so I think there's two possibilities here. One is because I had the same feeling. I felt in the first couple episodes like that she was not a good guy, but that maybe we were supposed to have a little bit of sympathy for her, and that towards the end we'd be having like her fighting against the protectorate not alongside Takeshi, but like kind of in partnership with him. And this episode, it felt like she took a real heel turn with how much she reveled in everything that happened and all of that.
Yeah.
Now, there's two things that we know, though, also. Somehow, Falconer got into this arena, and somehow the person who – and this is something I just thought of now as you said this, and maybe I'm way off in left field, but also that the person who had the power to control everything was a secret Falconer person. What if the governor is a Falconer person too, to some extent? Just like, for whatever reason, like, she wanted this to happen.
Yeah. Well, she did make peace with the Falconers, and that's what originally made me think, like, the way that she sets that up in the first episode and talks about making peace with that leader of the Kellist resistance or whatever, it made me think maybe there's something there. Maybe there's something going on with the with that character. But I don't know.
Certainly her actions this episode did not seem consistent with what we learned about her in the first two. And it's subtle enough that I think that could just be not great writing, but I also want to give the writers credit and think that that's very intentional, and that she's running some kind of long con herself. And I doubt that she's just like a full-on Falconer believer. I think she probably has some cynical motivations, but I really hope that this isn't just her making a total heel turn, that she actually has some kind of like plot that is going on that was somehow involved with all this.
Yeah, I'm with you there. We get a little bit backstory to the world in this episode, where they say they're projecting the enemies onto the faces, or projecting the people you hate onto the enemy's faces during war, and they said that was during the Neo-American Order.
Neo-American Empire, yeah.
Empire,
that was
yeah,
a nice little touch.
Yeah, so there's a little something going on there.
I was gonna say that's a fun thing because, and certainly every army has done this, but Americans certainly, we have a long history of, obviously we don't have that technology, but of doing everything we can to dehumanize the enemies that Americans are fighting to make it easier to kill them.
Right.
You know, like the way the Japanese and the Vietnamese in particular were portrayed during those conflicts, during those wars.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I don't think it's
inhuman and things like that.
I don't think it's just that.
So I love that idea of this is like the extension of that.
I don't think it's just that. I think it's every time that people want to motivate someone to action, and they say that most effective motivational tool ever created is what they say in this episode. And I think that works for, and you're going to very much disagree with me on this, but I think that works for I think there are people on every side of political arguments where people try to convince them that they are the greatest evil, you know?
Yeah.
And that they're subhuman. I think that in many ways the right wing, far right wing in this country tries to convince everyone that
yeah, it's the idea that all liberals are crazy socialists and that all conservatives are Nazis.
Well, you get ahead of me there. I'm saying that all immigrants, like they try to convince them that all immigrants are after them, and then every liberal tries to convince you that all billionaires are after you.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you'll disagree with that characterization, but I think that I think
the general concept is there. I think that I think there's a level of hold on, let me edit that out. Let me start my response over again. No, I mean, I think you are right that same urge happens from all directions. And I think that there's always an urge to demonize the people you're fighting against. I think that there's, I don't think the fact that it happens all the time means that it's always equal. And I think there's different levels of justification, and that can be a whole other discussion into and of itself.
Sure.
But yeah, certainly I think that there's a way in which, in our current, it is hard to have a nuanced discussion about the various levels of problematic behavior on Twitter in 240 characters. Like, you just don't do it.
For sure.
I think there's always been that part of the human condition. And I think this show is a really interesting commentary on that, about how, you have this ability to now literally change someone else's perceptions. We put things on Twitter, we put things on social media to try and change how you perceive the people that someone else wants you to see as an enemy. And here now with technology, you can't just like affect someone's thoughts. You can literally do that. And yeah, I think it's brilliant. I talked about the American army doing that, but yeah, every army's done that, and every political movement's done that. No argument there.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. I found that line fascinating, that projecting your enemy is the greatest motivational tool ever. And I think that's just a beautiful line, and it's a beautiful, again, use of this sort of sci-fi elements to tell a story that is, completely human and completely highlighting what we do here. And I love that.
Right. Well, yeah, because it's an idea of like, what is, a great kind of argument is to take something to its logical extreme and see what would happen. And I think what this show does so well is to say, okay, we have these kind of interesting ideas about the difference between the body and the mind. But what if technology allowed us to really push that? What if technology allowed us to really push the idea of demonizing the enemy? I mean, yeah, it's utterly brilliant. And I hadn't thought about it in those terms really until you talked about it like that. But I really like the way you're describing that.
Yeah, thanks. I know I keep harping on this. I know I do. And it probably would not have been great to use it twice in 2 episodes like this. But in this moment, there's a moment where he has decided to die. He's decided to let Raylin kill him. The fake Phelan, we'll call her. And he like, she's going down to stab him, and he looks over and sees Falconer, and it inspires him to fight.
Right.
And he reaches up with his hand and pushes the sword so that it goes through his shoulder instead of his heart. I really wish that they had established in season 1 that the thing envoys can do is stop things with their hands and let it cut their hands, because they can focus their minds in a way that lets them ignore the sleeve or whatever, because that would have been another great moment for it. When a knife is coming down at him, he sees Falconer, and it inspires him to become the envoy that he should be, and reaches up his hands and lets the knife go through his hand to divert it or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, especially because, like, I know he's an envoy. I know he's supposed to be able to deal with things, but, like, he's up and fighting pretty much after getting stabbed through the shoulder, as well as 2 pretty bad slashes of a blade.
Yeah. Oh, straight through the stomach, too, which is not a good place. You don't want to get stabbed through the stomach like that. Sliced.
Yeah, and it was like yeah, it was just... in some ways, you're talking at the very beginning about violence being cartoonish. In some ways, that part almost seemed cartoonish, of just the level of damage that he took that didn't seem to really get to him. It was a little eye-rolly for me.
Yeah.
But you're right. I am. In some ways, I kind of like that we still have it somewhat as a mystery of exactly what they're taught to do with their sleeves and stuff like that. But you're right. There's an interesting story to go into about exactly how he can avoid sleeve death, allow damage to his sleeve to really affect his stack.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing they're supposed to be doing as envoys. I just thought the letting it hit the hand thing that I keep going back to as what they should have done instead of, because it's now 3 times where it would have been really impactful, more impactful than what they did. Anyway, we have a few people writing in over here on the chat. If you're up for answering a few chat things, did you have anything before we go to that?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, let's do it.
Okay. Drew Gretsch says, "Hope we get some Falcon versus Misty Knight action," which when I first read that I was confused because I was thinking Falconer, but no, Falcon in this case I think is talking about a Sam Wilson, or his real name.
Right.
What's his real name? Dang it.
Oh, the actor who plays
Falcon.
I'll look that up quickly.
I had it I had it just like a second ago. Oh man, I feel bad.
Anthony Mackie.
That's it.
I didn't have to look it up.
You got it. Good job.
Thank you.
So yes, I would love to see Anthony Mackie and Misty Knight go down, which I don't know her name, but yeah, like that would be awesome. Get some good Marvel folks in this thing so far. Sick with it 87 says, "I loved Altered Carbon. It's all I think about now with all the Marvel stuff being postponed." Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, it hits true, but it's you know, and in some ways, we have talked, and I know you have talked, and I've talked on Superhero Ethics about how, really bummed I was that the Marvel universe was leaving Netflix, because I felt like Netflix just took it in directions that that I'm not sure if Disney is able to do, and that the movies never went, in terms of like the darkness and the brutality, the violence. Like, some people have listened to my episode on Logan on my other podcast are probably wondering why I'm so like I against the violence here sometimes, and it's because, to me, I have nothing wrong with the brutality of violence, even if I personally have to look away. It's when I feel like violence is being shown for, like, hey, look how like fun this is, or more like the Quentin Tarantino version. Which again, I've got enough, that rant enough. We don't have to talk about it again. But I really like that I feel like these shows are filling that niche that the Marvel Netflix shows did, of really showing like comic book style sci-fi kind of stories, but in a pull no punches. Violence is bloody and ugly, and people are terrible, and here's what human emotions are like, kind of a way. It's a great connection, but it's interesting seeing we're getting so many of those Marvel actors, because it's kind of I think if I'm right, Netflix produced season 1 of Altered Carbon before, when it still had the Netflix shows, but it might have been after the Disney deals. I don't know the timeline there, but it does make me wonder if, especially once Netflix knew it was losing Marvel, that it started wanting to do more shows like this.
It's possible.
It's sci-fi and comic book are not the same thing, but there's definitely a big crossover audience there, and I'm really loving it. And I think that person has a great point. In a time when I don't have the Marvel universe, this is fulfilling that itch in a big way.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I think especially for the Netflix stuff, this is very much like that. You're right. Sigwith has a couple other comments. He says, "Are you guys going to watch the animated movie on Netflix after this season?" I'm cool with it. I kind of forgot about it. I'm glad Sick with it let us know, because I kind of forgot about that, because I was thinking we'd start The Boys in 2 weeks, but I guess we could do the movie next, which I think there's
the movie and then like a little bit of break, and then The Boys sounds good.
Yeah.
Oh, there's so much about The Boys I want to get into.
I know. I just want to get through I want to try to get through The Boys before season 2 gets here, because it'd be great to be able to actually watch season 2 when it comes out with everybody.
Do we have a release date for season 2?
We don't, so I'm hoping that it's far enough away, because at this point, even if we take a week off, we'll be done with Altered Carbon and The Boys before May is over.
Yeah, I think that's
because we only got
correct.
2 more seasons of stuff. So yeah, Sick with It also says, weirdest part of Altered Carbon for me was Raylin. Like, what was her deal? I get that she had a traumatic experience growing up being forced into the Yakuza, but man, she had some weird borderline incest stuff going on when it came to her brother. That scene,
sorry, keep reading.
That scene where she took over Ortega's body was weird. If he hadn't realized it was her, I don't think she would have stopped him in that tub. Yes, we definitely discussed that when it happened, but I think her deal, if to answer the question seriously, that's probably more of a joke. I think the whole idea is that just all mores,
Yeah.
all like niceties are over. All morality is kind of out the window if you're a meth that's lived that long, is what they're trying to tell us with the season 1. But
Yeah, no, I think that's true, and I think especially I was thinking that even in this scene when it's fake Raylan, but it's his version of her. I mean, the way that the two of them are interacting, that's a level of intimacy that and this felt more like romantic than sexual intimacy, but still a sensual intimacy that I don't associate with brother and sister, that I associate with lovers. And I certainly think that like I think it's a fun joke, but I think that person has a really good point of, that the feelings that Ray Lynn had for Tech definitely seem to cross that line. And I think, Matt, what you're saying makes sense because, if you think about in our own culture, like I think there's a number of reasons why we have very good reasons why we have a strong taboo against incest. And a lot of them are psychological and because the understandings of that relationship and the power imbalances and all of that. But the easiest one for many people is because of just the genetics, like how screwed up the children of that kind of thing can be. And so it's interesting, the idea of like once you get totally devoid of genetics and bodies and who cares and the psychological stuff you stop thinking about, like, yeah, I could see for someone like Ray Lynn and the meths, maybe there's just a sense of like, why not? Because why not anything else? It's one of the more horrifying parts of the meth idea. But it's the idea great comment.
Yeah, totally agree. And it's the idea that a lot, like you said, a lot of the psychological understanding that relationship are based on like you grew up together, based on your youth. Even people that aren't blood related still sometimes have that hang up, obviously that taboo, and so like it makes sense that like maybe they just get so far removed from their childhood and so far removed from that relationship, and the relationship develops so much in their mind or changes so much that they just don't care anymore. But yeah, it's disturbing.
Mm-hmm. Definitely true.
You got anything else on this episode you want to chat about?
No, I think it's a good wrapping up point. I think
cool.
I'm definitely a lot more excited about the season. Looking forward to Wednesday and continue to see where it goes. And I this seems like we've just had our hero rescue someone who we don't know where they've been. This seems like we're now going to get the episode of the two of them resting and recuperating in the hotel. AI Poe and AI Dig Number are going to start to connect, but that mostly we're going to get a lot of kind of background on Falconer. And I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, I would love it if we actually got some actual flashback on Falconer. That'd be really nice.
Yeah.
But anyway, well, thanks guys for hanging out with us. We're Bingers Assemble. Check us out at strandedpanda.com/bingers. We have all the ways to contact us right there. And you can find more shows from us over there at Stranded Panda. So thank you very much. Peace.
Long live Cal Christ Falconer.
Yeah.